Good evening. My name is Cole, and tonight I'm back with a fresh batch of unsettling stories that blur the line between paranoia and something far worse. I know it's been a little quiet around here lately. Life got busy and I needed to step away for a bit, but I appreciate everyone who's stuck around. So find a safe spot, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's disturbing stories that prove sometimes the scariest things happen when no one else is supposed to be there. Let's start with our first story. Our first poster discovered that sometimes the most terrifying presence is the one that hides in plain sight, moving only when you're not watching. Something in my house only moves when I'm not looking at it. I thought I was losing my mind at first. You know how sometimes you walk into a room and something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on what's different? That's how this whole thing started about 3 months ago. I'd wake up every morning and notice little things out of place. The kitchen chair would be turned at a weird angle when I was sure I'd pushed it under the table the night before. The bathroom door would be cracked open just enough to see into the dark hallway, even though I always close it completely. The living room lamp would be switched off when I distinctly remembered leaving it on. At first, I blamed it on exhaustion. I work long hours, and sometimes when you're really tired, your brain doesn't form proper memories of mundane actions like closing doors or turning off lights. But the frequency started bothering me. Every single morning, without fail, something would be different. I started paying closer attention to my routines. I'd make a mental note of exactly how I left each room before going to bed. Kitchen chair pushed in, bathroom door closed, living room lamp on. Then I'd wake up and find everything changed in these small, subtle ways. The thing that really got to me was how deliberate it all seemed. These weren't random disturbances, or things that could be explained by settling foundations or air currents. Chairs don't rotate themselves. Doors don't partially open on their own. Light switches don't flip themselves. I decided to test it. I set up my phone camera in the living room, pointing it directly at the chair that kept moving. I figured if something was actually happening, I'd have proof. If nothing showed up on the footage, maybe I really was just forgetting how I'd left things. The first night of recording, I reviewed the footage in the morning. Everything looked normal for the first few hours. Then, around 3 a.m, the video started glitching. The image would freeze for a few seconds, then jump forward, freeze again, jump forward. When the glitching stopped, the chair was in a different position. I thought maybe it was a problem with my phone, so I tried a different camera. Same result. The footage would be crystal clear until something was about to happen. Then it would malfunction in exactly the same way. I tried multiple cameras, different angles, even borrowed a friend's expensive camera equipment. Every single time, the same thing happened. Perfect footage until the moment something moved, then glitches and gaps that conveniently obscured whatever was causing the disturbances. The movements started getting more pronounced. Instead of just turning the chair slightly, it would be completely rotated to face a different direction. The bathroom door wouldn't just be cracked open, it would be standing wide open with the hallway light on. Books would be pulled out from the shelf and stacked in neat piles on the floor. What really scared me was when I realized the pattern wasn't random. The chair was always turned to face the hallway. The bathroom door was always opened in a way that created a clear line of sight to my bedroom. The books that were moved were always from the same section, all titles about local history and folklore. I started staying awake at night, watching and listening. I'd position myself where I could see multiple rooms at once, trying to catch whatever was doing this in the act. But nothing ever happened when I was watching. The house would be completely still and quiet all night long. Then I'd fall asleep from exhaustion, and in the morning, more things would be moved. The most unsettling part was how it seemed to know when I was watching. I could pretend to be asleep, keep my eyes closed while staying alert, but somehow it knew. Nothing would move until I genuinely lost consciousness. I tried sleeping in different rooms, thinking maybe it was tied to a specific location. It didn't matter. Whether I slept in my bedroom, on the living room couch, or even in the basement, things would still be moved by morning. Always in the same deliberate way, always creating those sightlines and pathways through my house. Last week, I decided to try something different. Instead of trying to catch it in the act, I started leaving it messages. I'd write notes and leave them in the spots where things usually moved, asking what it wanted or why it was doing this. The notes were always gone in the morning, but I never got any response, until 3 nights ago. I left a note asking if it was trying to show me something, and the next morning, I found it on my bedside table with a single word written underneath my question, in handwriting I didn't recognize. The word was soon. Now I don't know what to do. The movements are happening more frequently, not just at night, but during the day when I'm in other parts of the house. I'll leave a room for 5 minutes and come back to find furniture rearranged. I'm starting to feel like I'm being herded, like whatever this is wants me to follow a specific path or notice a particular thing. The worst part is that I'm beginning to understand the pattern. All the moved objects, all the open doors and turned chairs, they're creating a trail that leads to one specific spot in my house. The basement corner, where the previous owner apparently kept their darkroom for developing photographs. I've been avoiding going down there, but I have the horrible feeling that whatever's been moving things around my house is trying to guide me there. I just don't know if I'm ready to see what it wants to show me. That's a level of psychological torment that would break most people. The poster is dealing with something that's not just moving objects, but systematically manipulating their environment to create a specific outcome. The fact that it knows when they're watching and actively avoids detection while still leaving clear evidence of its presence is genuinely chilling. What's even worse is how it's apparently been building up to something, using months of subtle manipulation to guide them toward whatever's waiting in that basement darkroom. Let's move on to our next story, where another poster discovered that the line between dreams and reality might be thinner than we think. I keep seeing the same person in my dreams, and they're getting closer in real life. It started about 6 months ago with what I thought were just weird dreams. I'd find myself in these really vivid scenarios, always in places I recognized from my daily life. My neighborhood, the grocery store I shop at, the park where I walk my dog. But in every dream, there was this person standing in the background. At first, they were always far away, just a figure in the distance that I'd notice out of the corner of my eye. They never did anything threatening or even really interacted with the dream in any meaningful way. They'd just be there, standing completely still, watching. The person was always dressed in the same outfit: dark jeans, a plain grey hoodie, and white sneakers that looked too clean to be real. I could never make out their face clearly because of the distance, but something about their posture and the way they held themselves felt familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable. As the weeks went on, the person in my dreams started getting closer. Instead of being across a park or at the far end of a store aisle, they'd be maybe 20 feet away. Still not close enough to see details, but close enough that I could tell they were definitely watching me. Their head would turn to follow my movements in the dream, but they never approached or spoke. The dreams were becoming more frequent too. What started as maybe once or twice a week turned into almost every night. I'd wake up with this lingering sense of unease, like I was being studied or observed even in my sleep. During the day, I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder more often, scanning crowds for someone in a grey hoodie. About 3 months in, I started being able to make out more details. The person appeared to be around my age, average height and build. They had dark hair that was always partially hidden by the hood. But what really started bothering me were their hands. They kept their hands clasped behind their back in this very formal, almost military posture that seemed out of place with the casual clothing. The dreams were getting more intense too. Instead of just random scenarios, they started taking place in locations that were more personal to me. My childhood home, my workplace, even inside my current apartment. The person would be standing in these intimate spaces, always watching, always getting incrementally closer. I tried everything I could think of to stop the dreams. I changed my sleep schedule, avoided certain foods before bed, even tried meditation and relaxation techniques. Nothing worked. If anything, the dreams became more vivid and detailed. I started being able to see the person's face clearly, and that's when things got really strange. They looked like someone I should know but couldn't quite place. Like when you see someone at the store and you're sure you've met them before, but you can't remember where or when. Their features were unremarkable, the kind of face that would blend into any crowd. But there was something in their expression that made my skin crawl. They never smiled or frowned, just maintained this neutral, patient expression like they were waiting for something. 2 weeks ago, the dreams changed again. Instead of just watching me, the person started getting close enough to interact with my dream environment. They'd move objects slightly, open doors I'd just closed, turn on lights in rooms I'd just left. Still no direct communication, but they were making their presence known in a more active way. Then last Tuesday night, I had the most disturbing dream yet. I was in my apartment, going through my normal bedtime routine, when I noticed the person standing in my living room. They were closer than they'd ever been, maybe 10 feet away, and for the first time in all these months of dreams, they spoke. They didn't say much, just quietly called my name and asked if I could see them clearly now. Their voice was exactly what I'd expected, completely ordinary and forgettable. But hearing it made me want to run. I tried to move in the dream, but I felt frozen in place while they took a step closer and smiled for the first time. I woke up immediately, heart pounding and covered in sweat. But here's where things get really unsettling. The next morning, I was walking to the coffee shop near my apartment when I passed someone on the sidewalk who looked exactly like the person from my dreams. Same height, same build, same dark hair. They were wearing different clothes, just normal street clothes. But when they saw me, they smiled in the exact same way the dream person had smiled. Like they recognized me, like we'd met before. I stopped walking and turned around, but they were gone. Completely disappeared into the crowd of people on the sidewalk. I spent 20 minutes looking for them, checking nearby stores and side streets, but it was like they'd vanished. Since then, I've seen them 3 more times, always in different locations, always wearing different clothes, but always with that same knowing smile when they notice me looking. They never approach me or try to talk. They just acknowledge me with that smile and then disappear when I'm not looking directly at them. The dreams are still happening, but now the person is close enough to touch. They stand right next to me in the dreams, sometimes even reaching out like they want to make contact. But I always wake up before they can actually touch me. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't know if I'm having some kind of psychological breakdown or if there's actually someone out there who's been somehow infiltrating my dreams. All I know is that the line between sleeping and waking is getting blurrier, and I'm starting to worry about what might happen if they finally make contact in the dream world. What's worse is that I'm beginning to think they're not just randomly appearing in my daily life. I think they might be following me, learning my routines, getting ready for something. And based on how the dreams have been progressing, I don't think I have much time before whatever they're planning finally happens. This poster is experiencing something that cuts right to the heart of our deepest fears about privacy and safety. The idea that something can invade even our dreams and then manifest in real life is terrifying enough. But the systematic progression from distant observation to intimate proximity suggests this isn't random. The fact that the dream figure is now appearing in reality with that same knowing smile implies a level of awareness and intentionality that's absolutely chilling. Now let's turn to a story that reminds us that sometimes the most familiar things can become the most frightening. My reflection started smiling before I did. I've always had this habit of checking myself in the bathroom mirror while I brush my teeth. Nothing unusual about it, just the normal routine you do without really thinking. Brush, rinse, check if there's anything in my teeth. Maybe practice a presentation I have to give at work. Standard morning and evening stuff. About a month ago, I started noticing something that made me question my own sanity. I'd be standing there with my completely neutral expression, maybe even frowning, because I was tired or stressed about something. My reflection would be smiling, not immediately. That's what made it so disturbing. I'd catch it out of the corner of my eye, this slight upturn of the mouth that didn't match what my face was actually doing. When I'd look directly at the mirror, everything would be normal. My reflection would match my expression perfectly, just like it should. I convinced myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Or maybe the lighting in the bathroom was creating some kind of optical illusion. But it kept happening, always in those moments when I wasn't paying direct attention to the mirror. The smile started getting more pronounced. Instead of just a slight upturn, it became a full, unmistakable grin. I'd be brushing my teeth with my mouth full of toothpaste foam, definitely not smiling, and I'd see this wide, cheerful expression staring back at me from the mirror. I started testing it deliberately. I'd stand in front of the mirror and keep my face completely neutral while watching my reflection carefully. Nothing would happen. But the moment I looked away or focused on something else, I'd catch that smile in my peripheral vision. The worst part was how wrong the smile looked. It wasn't a natural, happy expression. It was too wide, showing too many teeth, and it never reached the eyes. It looked like someone who had learned what a smile was supposed to look like, but had never actually felt the emotion behind it. 2 weeks ago, I decided to really pay attention. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared directly at my reflection, while keeping my face completely serious. I watched for almost 10 minutes, not breaking eye contact, not letting my attention wander even for a second. My reflection stared back with the same neutral expression. Then, while I was watching, while I was looking directly at it, My reflection's mouth started to curve upward, slowly, deliberately, like someone was manually adjusting the corners of its mouth. I felt my own face to make sure I wasn't unconsciously smiling. My mouth was completely neutral, but my reflection was grinning wider and wider until it looked almost inhuman. The smile stretched beyond what should have been physically possible, showing teeth that seemed too sharp and too numerous. I stepped back from the mirror, and immediately my reflection returned to normal. Same confused, scared expression I was wearing. No trace of that horrible smile. Since then, it's been getting worse. The smile appears more frequently, and it's not limited to times when I'm not paying attention. Sometimes I'll be looking directly at the mirror, and my reflection will smile while I'm frowning. Sometimes I'll catch it making facial expressions I'm not making, like raising an eyebrow or tilting its head. Yesterday morning, I was getting ready for work and noticed something that made my blood run cold. I was brushing my hair, and my reflection was brushing its hair too, but we weren't moving in sync. I'd brush to the left, and it would brush to the right. I'd lower my hand, and it would keep brushing for several seconds before matching my movements. It's like my reflection is developing its own agenda, its own personality, and that personality seems to find something very amusing about watching me realize what's happening. I've started avoiding mirrors as much as possible, but that's not really sustainable. You can't live your life without ever seeing your reflection. But every time I do look, I wonder if what's looking back is really me, or something else that's learned to imitate me. The most terrifying thought is that maybe it's not my reflection that's wrong. Maybe I'm the reflection, and the thing in the mirror is what's real. This poster's experience taps into something primal about our relationship with our own image. The idea that our reflection could act independently, especially with that unnaturally wide smile, strikes at the heart of our sense of self and reality. What's particularly disturbing is how the reflection seems to be developing its own awareness and agenda, moving from subtle discrepancies to outright defiance of the poster's actual movements. Our next story deals with something that many of us have experienced but rarely talk about, those inexplicable moments when our homes seem to develop a will of their own. Every night at 3:12 a.m., my bedroom door opens by itself. I'm an incredibly light sleeper, which is both a blessing and a curse. I wake up if a car door slams 3 blocks away, but I also notice things that other people might sleep through, like the fact that my bedroom door opens every single night at exactly 3:12 in the morning. It started about 2 months ago. I'd wake up to the soft creak of the door hinges and see my door standing part-way open, maybe 6 inches, just enough for someone to look through, but not enough to see into the hallway clearly. At first, I figured I hadn't closed it properly before going to bed, or maybe the house was settling in a way that caused the door to swing open, but it kept happening. Every night, same time, same amount. I started paying closer attention to how I closed the door before bed, making sure it was completely shut and the latch was engaged. Didn't matter. 3:12 a.m. every night, the door would be open. I thought maybe it was an issue with the door frame or the hinges, so I had a handyman come look at it. He checked everything, adjusted the hinges, made sure the frame was square, even installed a new latch mechanism. That night, I closed the door extra carefully, listened for the click of the latch engaging, even gave it a little tug to make sure it was secure. 3:12 a.m., door open. I decided to try locking the door. I installed a simple deadbolt that could only be unlocked from the inside, locked it before bed, checked it twice to make sure it was secure, woke up at 3:12 to find the door standing open and the deadbolt unlocked. That's when I started getting really disturbed. A door can't unlock itself. Someone or something had to have turned that deadbolt from the inside of my room while I was sleeping. But I live alone, and there's no way anyone could have gotten into my house without me knowing. I tried blocking the door. I pushed my dresser in front of it, heavy enough that it would take significant effort to move. Woke up at 3:12 to find the dresser pushed to the side and the door open. The dresser was moved so precisely that nothing on top of it had been disturbed. No picture frames knocked over, no loose change scattered. It had been lifted and repositioned with surgical precision. I set up a camera pointed directly at the door. Figured if something was physically moving the door and the dresser, I'd have video evidence. Reviewed the footage the next morning and found something that made me question my own sanity. The video showed me going to bed, turning off the lights, everything normal. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the timestamp on the video jumped forward by about 30 seconds. When the video resumed, the dresser was in a different position and the door was open. Whatever happened during those missing 30 seconds wasn't recorded. I tried multiple cameras, different brands, Even borrowed a professional security camera from a friend who runs a business. Same result every time. Perfect footage until 3:12 a.m, then a gap, then the door is open. Last week, I decided to try staying awake to watch it happen in real time. I sat in a chair facing the door with the lights on, determined to see exactly what was causing this. I made coffee, did jumping jacks to stay alert, everything I could think of to make sure I wouldn't fall asleep. At 3:11 a.m, I was wide awake, staring directly at the door. I watched the clock on my phone tick over to 3:12, and the door started to open. Not all at once, but slowly, like someone was carefully turning the handle and pushing it open inch by inch. But there was no one there. I could see the handle turning by itself, hear the soft click of the latch disengaging, watch the door swing open to that familiar 6-inch gap. The deadbolt I'd installed turned smoothly, like an invisible hand was operating it. When the door finished opening, it just stopped. No further movement, no sound, just an open door leading to my dark hallway. I sat there for the rest of the night, afraid to approach the door, afraid to look into the hallway. Because even though I couldn't see anyone or anything that had opened the door, I had the overwhelming feeling that something was standing just outside my room, waiting. The next morning, I found footprints in the dust on my hardwood floor, not leading to my door, but starting right at the threshold and walking deeper into my house. Like whatever opens my door every night doesn't come from the hallway. It comes from inside my room and leaves through that open door. I don't know what's in my room with me while I sleep, but apparently it needs to leave every night at 3:12 a.m, and it's polite enough to open the door instead of just walking through the walls. The precision and consistency of this haunting is what makes it so deeply unsettling. Whatever's happening isn't random or chaotic. It's methodical, purposeful, and apparently intelligent enough to manipulate locks, move furniture, and avoid detection by cameras. The revelation that something might be leaving the room rather than entering it adds a whole new layer of horror to the situation. Let's continue with a story that shows how our modern technology can become a window into something far more sinister than we ever imagined. I live alone, but my phone keeps asking if I want to share my location. I've always been pretty security conscious with my phone. I keep location services turned off for most apps, use strong passwords, never connect to random Wi-Fi networks. So when I started getting notification pop-ups asking if I wanted to share my location, I was immediately suspicious. The first time it happened was about 3 weeks ago, around midnight. I was lying in bed, scrolling through social media when the notification appeared. Share location with nearby device, with options to allow or deny. I hit deny without thinking much about it. Figured maybe my neighbor's smart TV or something was trying to connect. But it kept happening. Always late at night, always when I was alone in my apartment. The notifications would pop up randomly, sometimes multiple times in one night. I started paying closer attention to the details in the notification, and that's when things got weird. The request wasn't coming from a device name I recognized. Instead of John's iPhone or living room Apple TV, it would show cryptic strings of numbers and letters that looked more like MAC addresses or device IDs. Sometimes the requesting device name would be completely blank. I checked my location sharing settings and confirmed that I wasn't sharing with anyone. I also checked my Wi-Fi connections, Bluetooth settings, everything I could think of that might be causing these phantom requests. All my settings were exactly as they should be. The notifications started becoming more frequent. What had been once or twice a week became almost every night. Always between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Always when I was the only person in my apartment. I started taking screenshots of the notifications to document what was happening. That's when I discovered something that made my skin crawl. When I went into my phone's location sharing history, I found dozens of denied requests that I didn't remember getting notifications for. The history showed requests being made and denied throughout the day and night, far more than the pop-ups I'd actually seen. Someone or something was constantly trying to access my location, and I was only seeing a fraction of the attempts. I contacted my phone carrier to ask if there was some kind of network issue or security breach that might explain the requests. They ran diagnostics on my account and found nothing unusual. They suggested I reset my network settings, which I did, but the notifications continued. I tried turning off all location services completely. Didn't matter. The requests kept coming through, even when my phone was supposedly not broadcasting any location data at all. Last week, I decided to dig deeper into the device history. I found that I could see more details about the requesting devices by going into the privacy settings. What I found there made me want to throw my phone in the trash. According to the logs, all of the location requests were coming from devices that were physically inside my apartment. The signal, strength, and connection data indicated that whatever was making these requests was in the same room as me, sometimes within just a few feet. But I live alone. I don't have any smart home devices, no gaming consoles, no tablets or laptops that would be making location requests. Just my phone and my basic cable box. I started checking the requests in real time. I get a notification, immediately check the device details, and see that the request was coming from something that was apparently right next to me. I'd look around my empty apartment, seeing nothing that could be generating these requests. 3 nights ago, I got a location request while I was sitting on my couch watching TV. According to the device information, the request came from something that was less than 3 feet away from me. I was sitting alone in my living room, and there was nothing electronic within 3 feet except for my coffee table lamp. I moved to different rooms in my apartment, and the requests followed me. Kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, didn't matter. Whatever was trying to access my location was apparently moving with me, staying close enough to maintain that strong signal connection. Yesterday, I decided to try something different. When the next location request popped up, I hit allow instead of deny. The notification disappeared immediately, and for the next few hours, nothing unusual happened. But when I checked my location history this morning, I found something that made me seriously consider moving out of my apartment. My phone had recorded my location data for the entire night, but according to the logs, my phone had been in 2 places simultaneously. The GPS data showed me lying in my bed, but there was a second location marker that had been moving around my apartment all night. According to my phone's data, something else with access to my location was walking through my rooms while I slept, checking every corner, every closet, mapping out my entire living space with the precision of someone who was planning something. I've changed all my passwords, reset my phone to factory settings, even got a completely new device. But the location requests keep coming. Whatever's been trying to track me apparently doesn't need my permission anymore. This story perfectly captures how our increasing reliance on technology can make us vulnerable in ways we never imagined. The idea that something unseen is constantly trying to track your movements, especially from within your own home, is a modern nightmare that feels all too plausible. The revelation that something was apparently mapping the apartment while the poster slept suggests a level of intelligence and planning that's absolutely terrifying. Now let's explore a story that shows how the most innocent discovery can become the most haunting revelation. I found a voice memo on my phone recorded while I was asleep. I don't use the voice memo app on my phone very often, maybe once every few months to record a quick reminder or capture a song lyric that pops into my head. So when I saw that I had a new voice memo recorded at 2:47 a.m. last Tuesday, I was immediately confused. The file was titled Voice Memo 001 and showed a duration of 4 minutes and 36 seconds. I definitely hadn't recorded anything before going to bed, and I'm such a heavy sleeper that it would take a fire alarm to wake me up in the middle of the night. My first thought was that maybe I'd somehow activated the app accidentally while sleeping, maybe rolled over on my phone and hit the record button. It happens sometimes with touchscreen devices. I figured I'd listen to a few minutes of muffled breathing and rustling sheets before deleting it. But when I pressed play, what I heard made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. The recording started with about 30 seconds of complete silence. Not the kind of silence you get when a phone is muffled under pillows or blankets, but the clear, crisp silence of a device recording in an open room. I could hear the faint hum of my refrigerator in the background, so I knew it was definitely recorded in my apartment. Then came the breathing, slow, deliberate breaths that were clearly audible and definitely not coming from someone who was asleep. The breathing pattern was too controlled, too conscious. Someone was breathing very quietly, like they were trying not to be heard. After about a minute of this careful breathing, I heard movement. Soft footsteps on my hardwood floors, moving slowly across what sounded like my living room. I recognized the particular creak of the floorboard near my bookshelf, the slight echo that happens when someone walks past my kitchen doorway. The footsteps stopped, and there was another long period of silence. Then I heard something that made my hands start shaking. The sound of my bedroom door opening, the specific squeak of the hinges that I'd been meaning to oil for months. More footsteps, softer now, like someone was walking on the carpet in my bedroom. The breathing became even quieter, more controlled. Whoever was recording this was standing in my bedroom while I slept, being very careful not to wake me up. Then came the part that made me almost drop my phone. A voice, barely above a whisper, said my name. It wasn't my voice. I know what I sound like on recordings, and this was definitely someone else. The voice was soft, almost gentle, like someone trying to wake a child without startling them. But there was something wrong with the tone, something that made it sound more like a question than a greeting. The voice said my name 3 more times, each time a little clearer, a little more confident, like whoever was speaking was testing whether I could hear them, seeing how loud they could get without waking me up. After the 4th time, there was a long pause, maybe 30 seconds. Then the voice spoke again, still in that same careful whisper. "Are you ready yet?" The question hung in the air for what felt like forever. I could hear my own breathing from across the room, the deep, steady breathing of someone in deep sleep. Whoever was asking the question was standing close enough to my bed to record my breathing clearly, but far enough away that their voice sounded like it was coming from across the room. The voice asked the question 2 more times. "Are you ready yet?" Each time with a slightly different inflection, like they were genuinely curious about the answer. The recording ended abruptly after that. No footsteps leaving the room, no sound of doors closing, no indication of how or when this person left my apartment. I checked every lock on my doors and windows. Everything was secure, exactly as I'd left it the night before. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing or disturbed. But someone had clearly been in my apartment, in my bedroom, close enough to touch me while I slept. I called the police, but without any evidence of a break-in or theft, there wasn't much they could do. They took a report and suggested I change my locks and maybe install a security system. I've listened to the recording dozens of times now, trying to recognize the voice, trying to figure out what "Are you ready yet?" could possibly mean. The voice doesn't sound familiar, but there's something about the way they say my name that makes me think they know me. The worst part is that I keep finding new voice memos on my phone. Not every night, but 2 or 3 times a week. Always recorded while I'm sleeping. Always featuring that same careful breathing and soft footsteps. But the voice is getting more confident in each recording. Less whispering, more normal speaking volume. And they're staying longer each time, sometimes recording for 10 or 15 minutes. In last night's recording, they didn't just ask if I was ready. They told me what I need to do to get ready. And based on what they described, I don't think I want to find out what happens when I am. The intimacy of this violation is what makes it so deeply disturbing. Someone has been entering this poster's most private space repeatedly, standing close enough to record their sleeping breath, and apparently preparing them for something. The escalating nature of the visits and the increasingly specific instructions suggest this is building towards some kind of culmination that the poster definitely won't want to experience. Our next tale brings us face to face with the kind of presence that doesn't need to move to make its intentions terrifyingly clear. Something has been standing outside my bedroom door for hours. I noticed it around 11 last night when I got up to use the bathroom. There was a shadow under my bedroom door that shouldn't have been there. Not the kind of shadow you get from furniture or clothes hanging on a door handle, but the distinct outline of 2 feet standing right outside my room. At first, I thought maybe my roommate was up late and had paused outside my door for some reason. Maybe they heard something and were checking to see if I was awake, or maybe they were just standing in the hallway looking at their phone. But when I checked the time on my clock, it was almost midnight, and my roommate had gone to bed hours earlier. I waited for the shadow to move, expecting to see the feet shift or walk away. But they stayed perfectly still, positioned right in the center of my doorway like someone was standing at attention. The shadow was dark and crisp against the light coming from the hallway, clear enough that I could make out the outline of what looked like bare feet. After about 10 minutes of watching and waiting, I started to get annoyed. If it was my roommate, why were they just standing there? I called out softly, asking if everything was okay, but got no response. The shadow didn't move or react to my voice at all. I decided to get up and check what was going on. Maybe my roommate was sleepwalking, or maybe they felt sick and needed help, but were too disoriented to respond. I quietly got out of bed and approached the door, moving slowly so I wouldn't startle whoever was out there. The shadow was still there when I reached the door. I could see it clearly through the gap at the bottom, 2 feet standing perfectly parallel, not shifting weight or showing any of the tiny movements that people make when they're standing still. It looked like someone had been carved from stone. I pressed my ear to the doors and listened carefully. No breathing, no shuffling, no sound of fabric moving or joints creaking. Complete silence from the other side. But the shadow remained, dark and motionless against the hallway light. I reached for the door handle, planning to open it quickly and see what was going on. But as my hand touched the metal, I hesitated. something about the absolute stillness of those feet made me deeply uncomfortable. Normal people don't stand that motionlessly for that long, especially not in the middle of the night outside someone's bedroom door. I decided to wait a little longer, thinking maybe whoever it was would eventually move or go back to their room. I sat on my bed where I could see the door clearly and watched that shadow for another hour. It never moved, not even slightly. Around 1 a.m, I started to wonder if I was seeing things. Maybe it was just an optical illusion caused by the way the hallway light was hitting something in the corridor. I turned on my bedside lamp to change the lighting in my room, thinking it might make the shadow disappear or reveal what was actually casting it. The shadow stayed exactly the same. If anything, the contrast between my lit room and the hallway made it even more distinct. 2 feet, standing perfectly still, positioned like someone was waiting patiently for something. By 2 a.m, I was getting genuinely disturbed. No one stands motionless outside a bedroom door for 3 hours. I thought about calling out louder or knocking on my side of the door, but something held me back. The longer I watched that unmoving shadow, the more wrong it felt. I tried to convince myself to just open the door and confront whatever was out there, but every time I started to get up, I'd look at that perfectly still shadow and feel this overwhelming sense that opening the door would be a terrible mistake. At 3:30, I finally worked up the courage to act. I couldn't spend the entire night staring at a shadow under my door. I got up, took a deep breath, and quickly turned the handle and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty, completely empty. No roommate, no furniture that could have cast a shadow. Nothing that could explain what I'd been seeing for the past 4.5 hours. But here's what made my blood run cold. When I looked down at the floor where those feet had been standing, I could still see the shadow. Even with the door wide open, even with me standing in the doorway looking directly at the spot, there was still a dark shadow on the hallway floor in the exact shape of 2 feet. The shadow wasn't being cast by anything. It was just there, like it had been burned into the floor itself. And when I stepped back into my room and started to close the door, the shadow moved. It shifted slightly, adjusting its position like someone was settling back into place. I slammed the door shut and pushed my dresser in front of it. I haven't opened it since, but I can still see the shadow under the door, and it's been standing there for 16 hours now. It hasn't moved, hasn't left, hasn't done anything except wait. I don't know what it wants or why it's there. All I know is that something is standing outside my bedroom door, and it doesn't seem to be planning on leaving anytime soon. The patience of this presence is what makes it so absolutely terrifying. Most hauntings involve movement, noise, some kind of dramatic manifestation, but something that can stand perfectly still for hours, that can cast a shadow without a body, that adjusts its position when you try to shut it out. That's a level of persistence and awareness that suggests intelligence and intention. The poster is essentially trapped in their own room by something that doesn't even need to be physically there to exert control. Let's move to a story where man's best friend becomes our early warning system for something deeply unsettling. My dog growls at one spot in the house and won't let me stand there. I adopted Rex about 6 months ago from a local shelter. He's a German Shepherd mix, about 3 years old, and he's been the perfect companion. Well-trained, friendly, protective, but not aggressive. He adapted to my house quickly and has never shown any behavioral problems or anxiety issues, until about 3 weeks ago, when he started acting strange around one specific corner of my living room. It started subtly. I'd be watching TV and notice Rex staring intensely at the corner near my bookshelf. Not just a casual glance, but that focused, alert stare that dogs get when they see something that concerns them. His ears would perk up, his body would tense, and he'd watch that corner like he was tracking movement that I couldn't see. When I'd look where he was staring, there was nothing there. Just the intersection of 2 walls, a floor lamp, and some books. But Rex would stay locked onto that spot for minutes at a time, occasionally tilting his head like he was trying to hear something better. The behavior escalated quickly. Within a week, Rex started positioning himself between me and that corner whenever I was in the living room. If I was sitting on the couch, he'd lie down directly in front of me, facing the corner. If I was standing near the kitchen entrance, he'd move to block my path to that side of the room. At first, I thought maybe he was being protective because he sensed something outside. Maybe there was an animal in the yard that was making him nervous, or maybe he could hear sounds from the neighbors that I couldn't detect. Dogs have much better hearing than humans, and Rex had always been very alert to his environment. But then he started growling. It began as a low, almost inaudible rumble deep in his chest. He'd be staring at the corner, body rigid with tension, and this threatening growl would build slowly until it was clearly audible. Not the playful growl he makes when we're playing tug of war, but a genuine warning growl that made the hair on my arms stand up. I tried everything I could think of to figure out what was bothering him. I moved the furniture around, thinking maybe something about the arrangement was making him nervous. I checked for signs of mice or other pests that might be hiding behind the bookshelf. I even had an exterminator come out to inspect for any kind of infestation. Nothing. The corner was completely normal. No signs of anything that should be making my dog react this way. But Rex's behavior kept getting more intense. The growling became more frequent and more aggressive. He started refusing to let me anywhere near that corner of the room. If I tried to walk over there to get a book from the shelf or adjust the lamp, Rex would immediately position himself in my path and refuse to move. If I persisted in trying to get to the corner, his growling would escalate to full barking, and he'd physically push against my legs to prevent me from moving forward. He never showed any aggression toward me, but he was absolutely determined that I not go near that spot. Last week, I decided to test something. I waited until Rex was outside in the backyard, then quickly walked over to the corner to see if I could sense anything unusual. Temperature, air movement, strange smells, anything that might explain his reaction. The moment I stepped into that corner space, I felt it. A coldness that seemed to come from inside my bones rather than from the air around me. Not just cold temperature, but a sense of something draining warmth from my body. And there was a smell, very faint but distinctly unpleasant, like flowers that had been left in water too long and started to rot. I only stood there for maybe 10 seconds before Rex started barking frantically from the backyard. He was throwing himself against the sliding glass door, desperate to get inside. When I let him in, he ran straight to me and began pushing me away from the corner with his whole body, whining and showing more distress than I'd ever seen from him. Since then, I've respected his warning. If Rex doesn't want me in that corner, I stay away from it. But I've started paying closer attention to what happens when he's focused on that spot. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I'll notice Rex's behavior change. He'll get up from wherever he's lying and go stand guard in front of the corner. Not aggressively, not growling, just watching and waiting, like he's monitoring something. And during those times, I swear, I can hear something too. Not a sound, exactly, but a presence. Like the feeling you get when someone enters a room behind you, even when you haven't heard them come in. 2 nights ago, I was reading in bed when Rex suddenly got up and padded out to the living room. I could hear him settling into position, and then everything went quiet. After about 20 minutes, he came back to the bedroom, but something was different about his demeanor. He seemed relieved, like whatever he'd been watching had finally left. That's when I realized that Rex isn't just reacting to something in that corner. He's guarding me from it. Whatever's there, he knows it shouldn't get near me, and he's appointed himself as my protector. I trust my dog's instincts completely now. If Rex says that corner is dangerous, then it's dangerous. I just wish I knew what he's protecting me from. The loyalty and protective instincts that make dogs such wonderful companions become genuinely chilling when they're focused on protecting us from something we can't see or understand. Rex's escalating vigilance and physical intervention suggests he's not just sensing something unusual. He's actively preventing the poster from encountering something that he perceives as a real threat. The fact that the poster actually felt something wrong when they tested that corner confirms that Rex's warnings are based on something real and dangerous. Our next story explores the deeply unsettling experience of hearing your own name in impossible circumstances. I keep hearing my name called from rooms I'm standing in. This started about a month ago, and I've been trying to convince myself that there's a rational explanation, but I'm running out of ways to explain away what's been happening, and it's starting to seriously disturb me. The first time it happened, I was alone in my kitchen making lunch. I was standing at the counter putting together a sandwich when I clearly heard someone call my name from behind me. Not shouted, just spoken at normal volume, like someone was trying to get my attention. I turned around expecting to see my roommate or maybe someone at the back door, but the kitchen was empty. I figured maybe the sound had carried from another part of the house, or maybe my roommate was calling from upstairs and the acoustics made it seem like it came from behind me. But when I went to find my roommate, they weren't home. Their car wasn't in the driveway, and I found a note saying they'd be out for the afternoon. I was definitely alone in the house. I convinced myself that maybe I'd heard a neighbor calling someone with the same name, or maybe a TV was on somewhere that I'd forgotten about. Sound can travel in weird ways through houses, and I've always had good hearing that sometimes picks up things from surprising distances. But it happened again 2 days later. This time, I was in my bedroom, sitting at my desk, working on my laptop. I heard my name called clearly from somewhere in the room behind me. Same tone, same volume, like someone standing maybe 6 feet away trying to get my attention. I spun around immediately, but the room was empty. I checked the closet, under the bed, even looked out the window thinking maybe someone outside was calling. Nothing. I was alone in the room, and there was nowhere for anyone to hide. Over the next few weeks, it started happening more frequently, always when I was alone, always from somewhere in the same room I was occupying. I'd be in the bathroom brushing my teeth and hear my name called from near the shower. I'd be in the living room reading and hear it from the direction of the TV, even though the TV was off. What made it especially unsettling was how normal the voice sounded. It wasn't ghostly or distorted or obviously supernatural. It sounded like a regular person saying my name in a normal, conversational way. If I heard that same voice in a crowded room, I wouldn't think twice about it. But the location never made sense. The voice always seemed to come from the same room I was standing in, but from a spot where no one could possibly be. Behind me, when I was facing a wall. To my left, when I was standing next to a window. From corners that were empty and visible. I started testing it systematically. When I heard my name called, I would immediately and thoroughly search the area where the voice seemed to come from. I'd move furniture, check behind curtains, even knock on walls thinking maybe sound was somehow carrying through from an adjacent room. I never found any source for the voice, and I never found any logical explanation for how someone could be calling my name from a spot I was looking directly at. The calls started coming more frequently, sometimes multiple times in one day, and they seemed to be getting more persistent. Instead of just calling my name once, I'd hear it repeated 2 or 3 times in a row, like someone was trying harder to get my attention. Last week, something changed that made the whole experience much more disturbing. I was in my living room organizing some papers when I heard my name called from the corner near the bookshelf. But this time, when I turned toward the voice, it called my name again from a different location, and again from somewhere else. It was like the source of the voice was moving around the room while I stood there. I'd turn toward where I'd just heard it, and it would call from behind me. I'd spin around, and it would call from my left. For about 30 seconds, my name was being called from different spots around the room in this slow, deliberate pattern. I stood completely still in the center of the room and listened as the voice seemed to circle around me, calling my name from different positions, like someone was walking in a slow circle just out of sight. When it stopped, the silence felt heavy and expectant, like whoever had been calling was waiting for me to respond. I haven't heard my name called since that night, but I have the feeling that the silence isn't permanent. Whatever was trying to get my attention seems to have found a way to make sure I was listening. And now I'm terrified to find out what it wants to tell me. The systematic nature of these calls and their impossible locations create a sense of being hunted or stalked by something that exists just outside normal perception. The progression from single calls to multiple calls to the voice actively circling around the poster suggests an intelligence that's learning and adapting its approach. Most disturbing is the implication that whatever's been calling has achieved its goal of getting the poster's full attention, and now the real communication is about to begin. Let's conclude this collection with a story that shows how even the most solemn occasions can become gateways for the unwanted. I think something followed me home from a funeral. My great-aunt passed away 3 weeks ago after a long illness. She was 92 and had been declining for months, so while her death was sad, it wasn't unexpected. The funeral was small, just family and a few close friends, held at the old church where she'd been a member for over 60 years. I hadn't been to that church since I was a child, and walking into the dim sanctuary brought back a lot of memories. The heavy wooden pews, the stained glass windows that cast coloured light across the worn carpet, the smell of old hymn books and furniture polish. It felt like stepping back in time. The service was beautiful and respectful. My aunt had been beloved in her community, and the pastor shared stories about her kindness and generosity that made everyone smile through their tears. We sang some of her favourite hymns, said prayers, and celebrated a life well lived. After the burial, I drove the 3 hours back to my apartment, feeling emotionally drained, but also oddly peaceful. Funerals have a way of putting things in perspective, and I felt like I'd been able to say goodbye properly to someone who had been important to me growing up. But that night, things started feeling different in my apartment. It began with the lights. Every time I walked from room to room, the lights would flicker just as I passed under them. Not dramatically, just a brief dimming and brightening that caught my eye. At first, I thought it might be an electrical issue, maybe something wrong with the wiring or a problem with the power grid. But the flickering only happened when I moved through the apartment. If I stood still in one spot, the lights remained steady. The moment I walked from the kitchen to the living room, or from the bathroom to the bedroom, the lights would flicker in sequence as I passed under them. The next morning, I noticed a smell in my apartment that hadn't been there before. Flowers. Not fresh flowers, but the heavy, sweet scent of funeral flowers that have been sitting in water for too long. It was strongest in my bedroom and seemed to come and go throughout the day. I checked everywhere I could think of that might be causing the smell. I looked for hidden air fresheners, checked if any neighbors were using strongly scented products, even wondered if something had died in the walls. But I couldn't find any source for the floral scent. Over the next few days, both the light flickering and the flower smell became more pronounced. The lights would flicker every single time I moved through the apartment, and the floral scent was strong enough that visitors commented on it. When I told them I couldn't find where it was coming from, they looked at me like I was losing my mind. A week after the funeral, I started hearing footsteps. They were slow, deliberate steps that seemed to follow about 10 feet behind me as I moved around my apartment. Not heavy boots or shoes, but the soft, shuffling steps of someone walking carefully, like an elderly person being cautious not to fall. I'd walk from my bedroom to the kitchen, and a few seconds later, I'd hear those same slow footsteps following the same path. I'd go from the living room to the bathroom, and the footsteps would echo my route with that same measured, careful pace. The footsteps always stopped right outside whichever room I entered. If I went into my bedroom, the steps would stop just outside the bedroom door. If I went into the bathroom, they'd stop in the hallway, just beyond the threshold. It was like someone was following me around my apartment, but was too polite to actually enter the rooms where I was. Last night, I decided to test what was happening. I sat in my living room and waited, listening carefully. After about 10 minutes, I heard the slow footsteps begin in my bedroom. They walked from the bedroom, down the hallway, through the kitchen, and stopped right at the edge of the living room. I could sense a presence there, just outside my field of vision. The air felt heavier, and the floral scent became so strong, it was almost overwhelming. But when I turned to look toward the sound, there was nothing visible there. The footsteps stayed at the edge of the living room for almost an hour. I could hear occasional small movements, like someone shifting their weight or adjusting their position, but they never came closer, and they never moved away. When I finally went to bed, the footsteps followed me to my bedroom door and stopped there. I could hear them settling just outside my room, like someone taking up a position to keep watch. That's the end of that story. The idea of something following you home from a place of grief and loss feels especially invasive. Death has a way of thinning the barriers between worlds, and apparently, some things take advantage of those moments when we're most vulnerable. The poster's great aunt may have lived a full life, but it seems like something else decided to tag along when they paid their respects. The polite distance this presence maintains, stopping at doorways, following but not entering, suggests it might still be learning the rules of this world. These stories show us that horror doesn't always announce itself with dramatic flourishes or obvious supernatural events. Sometimes it creeps in through the mundane, turning familiar routines into sources of dread and transforming our most intimate spaces into hunting grounds for things we can't quite name or understand. If you enjoyed this batch and want more, make sure to subscribe. For now, sweet dreams. And remember, if something feels wrong in your house tonight, trust that instinct. Your subconscious might be picking up on something your conscious mind isn't ready to acknowledge yet.